have, sort of workshops or information sessions on Mondays, and we call them Member Mondays. I'm Yvonne Kafik, and I'm the Executive Director of Triathlon Saskatchewan. I want to welcome Anastasia Polito and Lisa Mensink tonight. And Anastasia is the Para Pathway Developer for Triathlon Canada. And Lisa, you're the Para Triathlon head coach. And you were in that former role, right? Is that right?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So before I introduce Anastasia, I would like to acknowledge that Triathlon Saskatchewan operates out of Treaty 6 and Treaty 4 territory, and we represent all athletes and members of Treaty 2, Treaty 5, Treaty 8, and Treaty 10 territory. I'd like to acknowledge the keepers of the land who keep it healthy and the importance of treaties that protect it, as the land is important to our lives and sport, and we couldn't exist without it. We thank you for giving us life and allowing us to carry out our vision of creating a vibrant, diverse, and healthy multi-sport community where all belong, feel welcome, and inspired to dream and achieve goals that are important to them. I think that really aligns well with our topic tonight around making triathlon more accessible for people with physical disabilities. And Anastasia has connected with us last year, trying to assess our events and trying to make them para-friendly. She's responsible for supporting para-triathletes at the community level and developing para-athletes entering the competitive pathway. She works on athlete recruitment, coaching, and education while also organizing national para-development events in the race calendar and other kinds of events and training camps for the para-triathlon community. She's a former competitive swimmer, pool swimmer, like many people in this room. And competing up to Div 2 national level. As an adult, she started competing in triathlon and raced as an elite athlete on the ITU circuit from 2001 to 2006. And she's been coaching triathlon since 2002, while also having coached swimming and downhill skiing. She's also a national technical official and a national level para technical classifier, and has worked with many organizing committees, including World Triathlon Championship Series, and as a race director in Quebec. In addition to all of that, she, in her free time, likes hiking, camping, skiing, free diving, and yoga, and loves to stand up paddleboard. So a very talented individual. And so I'm going to turn it over to Anastasia. Welcome.
Thanks so much, Yvonne, and thank you all for being here this evening. So we're going to go through a presentation which is kind of directed towards race directors, but it's really going to describe the categories in paratriathlon, the equipment that's used, the considerations that we need to have on race venues and race courses for these different categories of athletes. And if you have a really pressing question, go ahead and interrupt me, and if we can kind of maybe more keep the questions to the end, but if you think you might forget a question, then please pipe in. All right, so first of all, I'm just going to share my screen. So can everyone see the first slide? Oh. Triathlon Canada and PARAG designated races. Do you see that?
Yeah.
It's visible? Okay,
yes.
Great. Okay, thank you so much. All right, so just going to go through, first of all, what paratriathlon is, the different categories and classification and how that works, race course considerations, the rules, and any steps that you might want to be considering for hosting para athletes, or also if there are any in your community you have any questions or queries on coaching this evening, don't hesitate. So I'm just going to play a video here that was prepared for the Paris Olympics on para triathlon, and you'll just see part of the equipment and get a bit of an explanation quickly. I'm sure most of you are already well versed in this, but it's a nice review. All right, so that presented the sprint distance. We generally see super sprint and sprint distances for the para stream. And first of all, what we're really trying to encourage is, grassroots and then building up to our elite athletes. So community level opportunities are so important, and also very important for integration of anyone in the para community. So PDRs, these are para designated races. So that means that the PSOs, your provincial federation and Triathlon Canada has kind of had a look at the courses. We just want to make sure that the safety for all this different equipment is considered. And we're not really classifying para athletes or giving them medals at this point. It's really more of a participatory event that we're. Oh, Jen, you said you couldn't see the video. Did anyone else could anyone else not see the video? Or did you see it?
I saw it.
Huh.
Weird. Sorry, Anastasia, didn't mean to interrupt. I just couldn't see it. I don't know. Must have been something on my end.
Strange. Okay, I'll just
proceed.
make
It's
a
all
note
good.
to send. I'll send a link to it later. Okay, so you
Okay.
can watch it. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem at all. So we're generally taking an approach where this is about participation, and we're not doing any formal like categories or anything like that when we're at this point in time, like in races across the country. So what's really important is that, obviously it's great to see that Triathlon Saskatchewan has initiatives that they want to increase opportunities for para participation. And race directors are so important in this relationship. As I said, just between us and your provincial federation and each race. So we can really just make sure that the safety is considered, because sometimes we're not all familiar with the equipment that para athletes might be using, and what surfaces or conditions can be difficult for those athletes and their equipment. The other thing that we're really trying to get going more and more are intro days to triathlon, and hopefully developing more regional camps, as well as our national para development camp, which has been ongoing now for 2 years. So we have had intro days so far, like a 1-day introduction to triathlon on the para side in both British Columbia and in Ontario. And we're hoping to also expand those opportunities as much as possible across the country as well. So national level, we have the development camp, we have classification. So classification is determining the categories that the athletes fit into, depending on their deficiency And in that video, you saw we have 3 general categories. We have a visually impaired, we have our standing categories, and we have our wheelchair categories. And then there are subcategories through that. So we are offering sometimes when we can get the people together who are classifiers to set up panels so that we can let people know if they ever went to a higher level in their racing, probably what category they're going to sit in. We use the same parameters as the World Triathlon classification. And so it just allows some of the para athletes to know if they ever were to pursue an elite pathway, their likely category and the performance levels they need to be looking at. And then we have one event a year, which we call Para Open National Championships. And again, it's not about first, second, third. It's very participatory, and the athletes are really great also at really encouraging at each other and supporting each other. We've really got a wonderful small but strong and spirited community, and it's really been great to see this group at races. In international competition, I'll just go over quickly. We have international classification has to be done for these athletes before they can race. Sometimes their classification needs a review or has to be confirmed during a race once they've gone through their classification appointment. And sometimes it's very clear to the classifiers and they can be put into a category within their interview and classification meeting. Then depending on the performance levels of the person, they may get karting like national team and funding. And then we're obviously always still trying to feed into our elite representation internationally for World Championship and Paralympic Games. Sprint distance races, we sometimes also see on the international calendar super sprint, but sprint is the common distance. And we see continental events, continental championships, para cups, para series races, and then the world championships. Okay, so our different classification and categories. So classification happens for standing athletes and for wheelchair athletes by World Triathlon. And then for the visually impaired, it's the same international organization that assesses visually impaired athletes into 3 different categories. So it's only required for international competition. And as I said, we have these 3 main categories, and then we have subdivisions within them. So our standing card, PTS, Para Triathlon standing categories. We actually have 4 different medal categories here, from limitations that are minimal to limitations that are quite severe. And these could be for amputees or nervous system illnesses like ataxia and dystonia. So we see different types of athletes in these categories. So they're labeled PTS 2, 3, 4, and 5. If athletes are using prosthetics during a race at an international level, their equipment does need to be submitted to and approved by World Triathlon before they can use it when they're racing. So here you can just see our mild to severe impairments, and range of motion is considered, impaired muscle power due to illness as well. And then our PTVI category is athletes with visual impairments. There are 3 categories or 3 subcategories for 1 medal. At the international level, the guide is necessary throughout the race. In international competition, the guide must be the same gender. And we don't necessarily have to be so restrictive in community races. What we're trying to do is increase participation. So let's say, a family, a parent wanted to guide a child and they're not of the same sex. Think that's perfectly acceptable. Getting someone into the sport, it's only if they're going to get more serious. The PTVI category is for one medal. So what happens is in the PTV1, which are the athletes with the least sight, they start first, and then the athletes that are set in the second and third category have a delayed start. And that delayed start time is calculated every year by World Triathlon using a lot of different algorithms. So this year it was around, I think, 2 minutes, 40 seconds for the men, just to give you an example on that. So there again, you can just see how the different categories of sight capability are set into the triathlon categories for PTVI. Oh, well, we actually had the interval start system on the bottom of that slide. So, oh, hold on. Am I on the right slide? Here we go. Yeah. So as I said, the PTV1 category, they start at gun time, and the men this year were 2:41 delayed, and the women were in the PTVI 2 and 3 categories were 3 minutes and 11 seconds. They started at that delay behind the PTVI first category or complete blind category. And then our final category is our paratriathlon wheelchair class. And there are 2 subcategories in this class. So wheelchair users could have limitations in upper and or lower limbs. Often we see spinal cord injuries as well as illnesses like cerebral palsy. We have one athlete in Canada right now who is an amputee, but he's not able to use a prosthetic. So he also races in a wheelchair. So we can see some slightly different athletes in the wheelchair category. So the PTWC1 category is the most impaired, and PTWC is WC2, pardon me, is least impaired. And again, we have a delayed start. So the first group starts at gun time, and this year the men in the second wheelchair category had a 3-minute delay, and the women had a delay on their start by 3 minutes and 38 seconds. So this is just to give you some information. This is how World Triathlon and our international races are set up. We don't have to go into this kind of detail in terms of timing for our local races and our community races. As I said, what we really want to encourage is participation. But I think it's also just good to look at this information and see that we can really have, people with different challenges in the same category, and they might have different needs at a race venue and on a race course. So now we'll actually look at the equipment that these athletes race with. And is everyone seeing the slides okay? Okay, great, thank you. So in our wheelchair class, we have, they swim with exit assistance. So that is one thing that race directors, we want the race directors to provide is, depending on the number of athletes in the race, but volunteers who are trained on the swim exit, lifting athletes out of the water, or some just get assistance. So sometimes we have up to 3 people lifting an athlete out. If it's a spinal cord injury and they don't have use of the legs, 2 or 3, sometimes we get a third person to actually hold the legs. And so this is different from the athlete's handler. An athlete in a wheelchair is allowed a handler in transition, pre-transition, right outside the swim course, and then in transition to help that athlete switch from the different wheelchairs. But actually getting them out of the water, those are swim course volunteers, and they do need to be trained. So we'll go over that in a bit more detail later on. The athletes who are severely impaired in the wheelchair category are allowed to have a, sorry, I'm thinking in French now, attelle, like a brace to hold their legs together in the swim. So, so you may see some athletes with that. Then they're going to do the bike with a hand cycle, usually a recumbent, so they're in a very low position to the ground, almost lying down. And so the lowness of that hand cycle needs to be considered if there are speed bumps or curbs or anything on a race course, because they sit very low to the ground, and then they race with a racing wheelchair. And we'll see photos of all of this in a little while. Our visually impaired athletes swim tethered to a guide. The swim tether is elastic, so it's not going to hurt them in the water with the pull and push of the water. And the maximum length is 80 centimeters. Then they are on a tandem bike together with the guide in the front, and then they run also with a tether that is not elastic for the run, okay? And then our standing athletes, we can see prosthetics for the upper or lower body. We can see no prosthetics at all. It could be also, just as I said before, someone who has a neurological illness or other complications. They may need assistance exiting the swim. They may need they can also ask for assistance if they need with a prosthetic. Most of them are fine putting on their own prosthetic right when they get out of the water, or using crutches from the pre-transition area to transition. So this is one thing that's different with paratriathlon, is for our standing athletes and our wheelchair athletes, we have a pre-transition area as close to the swim exit as possible. And this is where they would either be placed in their day chair if they've been lifted out of the water, or they would take crutches or put their prosthetic on to go into transition. So hopping isn't allowed in triathlon. So that's what we're avoiding here with this pre-transition. So we want to have a area that's safe for them to be put into a chair, and their handler, if they have one, can be there to remove their wetsuit if they're wearing one as well. And then other than that, the handler will be mainly in the transition area for the wheelchair athletes for the most part. And we want to be as open as possible right now in paratriathlon in Canada, and as inclusive as possible. So if there are athletes that don't fit into standing, visually impaired, or wheelchair, someone who has balance issues and wants to do the bike on a tricycle, or someone who has intellectual deficiencies but is, and might need a handler in transition just because they need some guidance. We want to be accommodating as well to these kind of other categories, and hopefully you just grow the community and create other opportunities for everyone to race. So we just see, again, some examples here of adaptations. So we see prosthetics and for both upper and lower body. Swim exit volunteers may or may not be needed for the standing category, depending on the situation. And we don't have a lot of course considerations for the para athletes, because for the standing category ones, they use a regular bike. However, the picture here in the middle with the two athletes with prosthetics for the legs, this actual photo is from the test event in Paris. And this is one of the bridges, Alexandre, I can't remember which one, but actually they had a lot of trouble dealing with that surface and the prosthetics. So they actually paved that bridge before the Olympic Games after the test event. So prosthetics can, handle a lot of different surfaces. Also, coming out of the swim, if it's a really sandy area, like lifting, you see the athlete that's being lifted out of the water on the left side of this picture. If their stump gets sand on it, that's going to be so painful once they put the sleeve on their prosthetic. So we want to be careful about sand and sometimes some surfaces for the prosthetics, but we don't have a lot of course considerations that we need to be thinking about for the standing categories. When we get to the visually impaired category, because of the guide, the athlete is also, guided all through the race. So there's not a lot of considerations, except for the tandem bike is quite long. So the space and transition for it, the turns on the course, is there enough space for the tandem to turn safely and things like that. So those are the main things that we need to think about with the visually impaired courses, and just some images you can see examples of tethers and a guide and athlete on the bike. And then finally, our wheelchair category, where there's a lot more things to be considered. So some athletes will swim with leg braces if they have a spinal cord injury and don't have any control of their legs. All these wheelchair athletes in both categories are, no matter the temperature, allowed a wetsuit short. So that's always permitted. And they also need a day chair to move from pre-transition to the transition area. So often they'll be going to the swim start in their wheelchair. So their handler can move then that wheelchair to the pre-transition area at the swim exit. On the bike, they use the hand cycle, so we can see the middle picture there. You see how low it is to the ground. We do ask the athletes to make sure they have a flag on their hand cycle so that the other cyclists on the course can see them. And barring that, we could have somebody, actually a volunteer, following the athlete on a bike just to let people know, and also have like a physical and higher presence on the bike course. So there's some different solutions to having the hand cycle on the course, but we do need to think about how low the hand cycles are to the ground, and if there are obstacles that need to be, well, is there a speed bump? So then do you have to maybe build a ramp on either side of it just to make it easier for them to pass over it, as an example? So these athletes are allowed handlers, that the handlers are their responsibility to help them move from their day chair into their hand cycle and then into the racing wheelchair. We see that picture on the right hand side, the racing chair, which is used on the run course. There are limits in race courses for gradient, and again, with these, the hand cycle and the racing chair, we want to be careful about how technical the turns are. We also want to make sure that our run course is wide enough for two racing chairs that could pass each other. That could be something that happens, or if there's a racing chair on the course, also there's room for it. And if you have standing runners on the course at the same time, so not all courses are going to be wide enough for the racing chair. And if that's the case, you can still open your event to the para athletes, wheelchair athletes, as a swim bike rather than swim, bike, run. So we're always trying to look for options and create options, even if we don't have, an ideal course to be para-friendly for all three sports and all three of these categories. So race course consideration. So logistics too, particularly for an athlete like a wheelchair athlete, how they can get to and leave the race course. Their accessibility, is there a parking spot close by? Things like that should be considered with all the equipment they have. Accessibility of the course, terrain and potential obstacles, mainly in, things like turns, curbs, speed bumps, and how steep it is. We want to make sure always that our courses are safe and can support everyone on them. And we can adapt to sometimes using volunteers. So for example, if there's a U-turn on a run course, it's going to be hard for the racing chair. But if a volunteer could be placed there and actually lifts up the front wheel and helps that person turn, as long as it's done for every athlete, then we can, and we even see that sometimes at the international level where we have volunteers assisting in a certain area because there's a difficulty there. We really need to consider the equipment the athletes have, particularly, again, the wheelchair athletes. The space that they need in transition is going to be considerable, and make sure we have volunteers that just can support this clientele depending on the type of course we have, you might have. And in terms of support Triathlon Canada is ready to help help you, design race courses and think about venue considerations for these athletes, as well as your PSO, and also, some race directors who have experience. Like, don't hesitate to ask questions and look for support and look for answers, because it's a lot out there, and this is really part of my role too, is helping to create these race opportunities to be para-friendly. So I'm always super open and happy to help with any questions, concerns, or just, I'm not sure if this situation is okay. Don't hesitate. As I said, what we want to get to is having events that are safe, first of all, for everybody, so we can all enjoy the sport and be inclusive. So considerations for the swim course. So para athletes don't dive. They're always in an in-water start. So we have to consider, oh, well, do they have to walk across sand to get to the start? Are they in a wheelchair? If so, it's just planning. Have to be lifted, maybe to the swim start. And as I said, often with para, we need volunteers and handlers to take equipment from swim start to the swim exit. So it's just a little bit of coordination. If they're starting with a wave of regular athletes, you just want to make sure that there's maybe an area for them and their equipment so that they feel comfortable getting to the swim start. It's nice to differentiate them for the lifeguards on the water with a different color swim cap, if that's possible. And then the swim exit has to be considered. Is it a ramp? Is it stairs? Is it sand? If it's stairs, are they wide enough that two people could be carrying someone else up them? So we just want to make sure that we've got a situation that works. And again, if a swim course isn't viable for, one category of the para, well, maybe they could be doing a duathlon. So always just, what can we do to offer the most opportunity? But if we have a situation where it's not going to work out for one of the three sports in triathlon, can we offer an alternate event? Yeah, and the terrain to transition. So our standing athletes may be on crutches from pre-transition to transition. So, and our wheelchair athletes in their day chair, their regular wheelchair. So we just want to make sure that the terrain is viable for them to move from the pre-transition at the swim exit into the regular transition zone. All right. So we need that extra practice or extra volunteers, pardon me, for the swim exit. And this is something, I'm going to show you a video in a moment. I hope it's going to work, Jen. So this is something that you'll want to practice with your team of volunteers at the swim exit, how they need to lift and carry the wheelchair athletes out of the water. We use a sling. So the sling has cutouts in it, so you can have one hand on the sling and another hand around the back of the person, and then the person that you're lifting out of the water can put their arms on the shoulders of the people who are lifting them out. But just remember that this is usually, covered by the race volunteers, the swim exit volunteers, and you do want to practice with them in the days leading up to the competition. So there should be a pre-transition area that is designated just for the para athletes, as close to the swim exit as possible. And consider the ground surface from the pre-transition to transition. Usually chairs are put there so the person is lifted out of the water. Sometimes they're put into their wheelchair or a chair. Sometimes if it's a standing athlete who needs to put on a prosthetic, they're going to sit down in a chair, put their prosthetic on, and continue to the regular transition. So we definitely need extra chairs in this area. And if there's wheelchair athletes that you have at your race, their handlers are allowed to assist in that area, getting them into the day chair, taking off their wetsuit, etc. Okay, so this is a video for the Montreal Championship Series race, and yeah, this is during the race. I think we're going to see some swim exit. So we can see 2 or 3 people assisting the athlete into a chair. So this is what pre-transition looks like. And then the handler is there to help that athlete get the wetsuit off, get into their wheelchair, and then the athlete has to move themselves to transition. And then the handler helps the athlete get into first their hand cycle, and then after the hand cycle portion, into their racing chair. So each handler and athlete will come up with their system. So all as race directors, all your consideration is how much space do these athletes need in transition for 3 chairs and the space to move from one to the other. There we go. So the mount and dismount line, we just want to make sure, again, when we have athletes who are going to be in a hand cycle or a racing chair, that the width is considered, right? So we need to think of it, we need a wider area than if we just have regular bikes passing. That the mount dismount line is in a fairly flat area. So generally speaking, and we'll see in the rules later on, our hand cycle and racing chair athletes have to stop at that line and then start again. Okay, so we're used to normally there's flow there, and this rule doesn't, if it's a safety issue, it might be a rule that we set aside if we need to make sure everybody's moving. But this is what happens at the international level as they stop and restart. But if they're on a hill, then again, we might see that rule removed, okay? Any curbs, any obstacles, any speed bumps. A lot of our transition zones happen in parking lots, so we just want to be really careful about the terrain around them, particularly for our wheelchair athletes. So a bike course has a maximum gradient of 12%, which is pretty steep. So we don't usually see a lot of para courses get that steep, but that's the World Triathlon parameter, just so you know. And a turn point diameter of approximately 11 meters. And if that's tight, as I said, volunteers could actually help athletes around a hairpin turn or a turn that isn't wide enough. So one thing is the hand cycles I mentioned is they sit very low to the ground. So those athletes can't really see when the line of cone ends because they don't have the height to see it. So what we try to suggest is that, those big round construction cones that are about 4.5 feet high, those are really good to use for turnarounds on the bike course for wheelchair athletes because then they can see them. If not, you might want to, add a flag to it or add something, a sandwich board, something that's really clear because a lot of these athletes actually miss the turns because they can't see them. So we really want to identify the turns on a bike course for our wheelchair athletes. And then once again, we want to consider, are there speed bumps? Also, are there grates in the road that wheels could maybe get caught in? So road quality, we also want to, I know we're thinking about that already for our regular bikes, but sometimes with these wider cycles, 2 wheels in the back, we don't always think about how close they might get to a curb or something like that. And then a run course. The maximum gradient is 5%. We need enough width for 2 chairs to be able to pass each other. And the turnaround diameter is 10 meters. And again, with that racing chair, a volunteer could help if the turn is tight. And same considerations in terms of curbs, speed bumps, and grates. We want to just make sure the course is safe. And sometimes even, you know, if there's a grate that a bike wheel can put in, like sometimes just like, you know, a carpet going down, or, you know, the fake grass carpet can work. Okay, so this is just an example of a race that was held in Calgary that was para-friendly, and I just lost it 1 second. Okay, and this is how it was para-friendly. So first of all, a duathlon wasn't an option, so we see no duathlon available. Then we see for the wheelchair category, they weren't able to offer a triathlon. Okay, they were able to offer a swim bike option. So obviously the run course either had obstacles, or it wasn't wide enough, or couldn't accommodate the standing athletes plus the athletes in the racing chair. And you know, often a lot of our run courses are on narrow bike paths, so then they're not wide enough for the racing chair. So a swim bike option is a great alternative to be able to offer. For the VI athletes at this race, they had triathlon and a swim bike option, and standing class triathlon and swim bike option. And Lisa's got something to add. Go ahead, Lisa. And she was at this race, so.
Yeah, that's why I put my hand up.
Yeah.
That might be easier if I talk through this.
Yeah.
So this was our Calgary race a couple years ago, where we offered it as a para race, a PDR. And so the run course is really tight and is on a little pathway. So a race chair, definitely not an option. And the way the sequencing went of the race, having like a swim run option just would have been too challenging, because we kind of flip back and forth on the course. So we limited what we could offer, and if someone came to us with it that was identified as para, we kind of figured out what we could offer them and see what would work. And then on the day, ironically, that was when we had our water shortage and our pool actually closed down, so it ended up being a duathlon. So we only had one para participant in it, and so for her, we offered. She was going to use a hand cycle, but could still run. So she kind of fell into the other category, because she wasn't using full wheelchair equipment, but needed to be on a hand cycle for balance purposes. So she ended up doing the run bike run. So we were able to offer a duathlon option. So all that to say is, like, sometimes you never know until you talk to the athlete. So speaking with this athlete coming in, I knew that she could run, and the fact that we broke down the race into smaller run segments to be a duathlon, she was able to complete the whole thing. So she was super pumped with that, and it actually turned out better for her, because originally she was only going to do the swim and the bike, because the full triathlon was a bit too long on the run segment. So I think when you have a smaller volume of athletes coming into it, you can tailor those solutions towards what their needs are. So that was the whole purpose of this case study here. So different options are available, and sometimes you just have to think outside the box.
Great. Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, and you know, if you are going to have a para-friendly race in your registration, you want to have it indicated, like make sure that it's there so people can say that they're a para athlete and reach out to them. What's their situation? What do they need? Okay. And, you know, you're not going to have 25 para athletes, you know, like the most we see other than para open nationals is, you know, 3, 4, 5 if we're lucky, you know, and we're hoping to grow that, but it's not a lot of extra time and communication. And when you take that time, then you really know, oh, how that person is going to show up at the race course, with what equipment, what they're going to need. And really with para, if we prepare in advance, it really runs very smoothly. It just takes a little bit of extra preparation. So how to make your race para friendly? So yeah, how does it work for the athlete? We just said it, right? So we just want to find solutions that work for the athlete, for the terrain and the situation, for safety, making sure that it's safe for everyone. And as Lisa said, really try to think outside the box. And she and I both have a lot of experience, never with the para athletes, so never hesitate to contact us. Oh, this athlete has signed up for my race and I'm not sure about, the pre-transition for them, or I'm not sure if they're going to be okay on the run course. Ask us questions, but be creative and be open-minded and supportive and respectful. And as I said, what we're trying to do is offer more opportunities for inclusion, and so that more people are experiencing our great sport. And so it's just a matter of finding solutions, and there's really probably a lot more solutions than we think sometimes. And we're definitely willing to help, and you can always reach out to us. And just a few race rules. Okay, sorry, just was this slide in here before, Lisa? I don't remember this one. Oh, okay. Oh, this is just, I guess there's some opportunities for getting grants sometimes, and coach education as well in para. Sorry, I thought we had a slide on race rules. It seems to have.
It might have been with Andrew, but we can go over the high
Yeah,
level, like
yeah,
the important
yeah,
ones.
yeah. Okay, so I'll just do that on, yeah, here we go. Okay, so race rules. Well, they start in the water, so it's not a dive start. We have, for the wheelchair athletes in the swim, they can wear flotation shorts and or have a brace that's supporting their legs and holding their legs together. We want to provide support at the swim exit for standing and wheelchair athletes, definitely the wheelchair athletes, and some standing athletes will want assistance. And we can talk a little bit more about, any case that comes up, and talk to the athletes. So also finding out what they need. At the World Triathlon level, they actually color code the bathing caps depending on the type of support that's needed at swim exit, and guides for the VI athletes. So we don't offer any support for the VI athletes at the swim exit because they're tethered to their guide, and their guide will be helping them out of the water. So generally we see a green cap if they don't need any assistance, a white cap for the guides in the VI category, and then we see a yellow cap for some assistance, and I think red for they need to be lifted out of the water. And you don't have to follow that color coding, and but it's just but maybe having just all the para athletes with a different color bathing cap is just going to help identify them at throughout the swim course, and then definitely at the swim exit in case they need extra help. So they need to complete the course as instructed, the turn boys or all the boys, depending on how your course is set up for the swim. They're not allowed to hop, so standing athletes may need to use pre-transition to pick up crutches or a prosthetic, and the wheelchair athletes will use pre-transition to get into their day chair. Then all the athletes move into transition, and so same rule for the helmet, has to be on and done up before they're touching their bike, or with the wheelchair category, before they start to move on the hand cycle, they need their helmet done up. Our VI athletes who are completely blind are supposed to wear blackout goggles through the whole race. So They can wear their swim goggles for the whole race, or they can have a glasses that they wear on the bike and run, but they have blackout goggles. And then we have the start and stop for our hand cycles at the mount and dismount line. And what else for rules, Lisa?
There's a few. I was just gonna try and find our document and post it in the chat, and we can go
Okay.
through it for each one.
We can also send it to you. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously the VI athletes are tethered for the swim and the run. Yeah, but we can go over that, and also Yvonne's got her. Also, we'll likely do a session with the officials, like much closer to race season, just to go over the specifics of the para rules, and they sometimes get adapted a little bit season to season. So what's more, important, I think, tonight is that if you have any questions about race course considerations, venue considerations, the equipment that these athletes might be showing up with, and the space that takes, and considerations, or volunteers on race courses. That those are kind of probably more what we're talking about today: terrain, race course setup, race venues, things like that. So does anybody have any comments or questions at this point in time?
I'd like just to thank you, Anastasia, for and Lisa for going through this. I think this is a wealth of information. I know we've talked in the last year about making, one of our RMC events or events more as para, and it's just, I guess it's been lack of knowledge probably shared as well, and just understanding of like case by case. And I think that, I mean, I know we talked about that last year, but I feel like this really even emphasizes, like, again, like it's like whatever we can make do for the athlete, especially because we're a community, like you say, we're not at the level of competing in competitive events as such. So I just feel like taking away a lot from just making it available as per athlete, and really having those conversations early when you're making your event or race para. And then I guess just a couple questions I was just thinking about making echo para would be, like, we do have beach and we have sand, so we can overcome that by taking the athletes based on what their needs were of getting them out of the sand and such, and having that I don't remember us talking about like a pre-transition before or whatever, so that makes all sense. I was thinking that we don't have a lot of turns when it comes to the bike, but in my question would be like for transition, like it is in a grassy area, and there can be like gopher holes and that kind of stuff in that grassy area that we mark and all that kind of stuff. So, but our transition line is always like on asphalt in the parking lot area. So I'm just like, is that something that we could expand, having a transition if somebody was to use a bike, by the transition line there, instead of or having kind of like a separate transition area, I guess, or would we just like look at expanding it somehow, possibly? And I said, I think my third question would be, or really maybe more of a comment for the run, would be that it could be trail, so I'm not sure if it would be right for I know we'd have to look at every situation different, but just some thoughts that I'm having in my head as you're talking and going through through the different events.
Yeah, so just to answer some of your questions, I mean, sand we can definitely like overcome at the swim exit. And, maybe it's just making sure that just in case, there's a bucket of water in pre-transition, if someone needs to douse a leg down before putting on a prosthetic, so that's an easy one. A grassy transition, I mean, that could be an area that maybe the handler would be allowed to push the chair you know, and push the chair to a mount line or onto the asphalt. So we
Okay.
can allow assistance in certain areas if it's a complicated terrain situation. And your other comment, so sometimes too, like for example, the Magog Triathlon,
Mhm.
which has been a para event sometimes here in Quebec. Part of that run goes on grass, so they
Mhm.
don't put the para athletes on there. They set up their schedules so that the para athletes, instead of they do the run portion also on the bike course, which is all asphalt.
Okay.
So
Okay.
they put them at the end of the day so that
Yeah.
they can use the asphalt. Then it's free of all bikes by the time they're on the run course. So
Okay.
they use a different, you know, they reuse their bike segment
Mhm.
for the run just because the terrain of their run course is not suitable for the wheelchair.
Okay.
So,
That makes
you know,
sense.
that's how they found solutions. Every
Mhm.
setting is going to be a bit different, but of
Yeah.
course, as I said, we're going to, you know, look at what your race situation is and its setting and its environment and find as many solutions as we can.
Okay. No, awesome. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. Lisa, did you have something to, your hand was up?
Well, no, I was just going to add to
Okay.
that, Jen, just saying like, I think talking and identifying those athletes, if you have a way in your registration to identify if someone identifies as para, and then
Mhm.
communicating to them. So I've
Yeah.
been to your event, so I
Mhm.
understand the gopher holes. It's a real situation there.
Yeah.
So as long as maybe even putting that on the website, this is para friendly, but like there are some limitations on the run or something,
Right.
right? So
Right.
just
Okay.
communicating that, and the number one role is it safe for that athlete, right?
Yeah,
So if you start
absolutely.
with
Yeah.
that, and then if you can move that, like have the transition bump out onto that pavement so you can reserve a little spot there for a para athlete, that would be awesome, right? So just
Okay.
thinking about those solutions.
Okay.
But then communicating that to the athlete too, so that they know before what
The
they're getting
event, of
into, right?
course. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, and
Great.
one point while I had my mic open is just the swim exit volunteers, and I think Jen, you're in a healthcare professional, aren't you? Or is that, or
I'm
someone, one
not.
of the race directors in Saskatchewan was?
Um, I'm not, but I mean,
Okay.
I think about, sorry, when we were talking about just helping and assist with the athletes, I worked in the airline industry, so I
Okay.
worked with people with assistance of getting them onto the plane too as well when they
Yeah.
needed
Yeah.
assistance. So I understand those parts. So
Yeah,
not necessarily in the
I
medical.
find with the races, if you start asking, there's a lot of
Yeah,
people who do work in healthcare or therapists
absolutely.
or know how to
Yeah.
to move patients and athletes in this
Yes.
case. So
Yeah.
usually like that's the like race directors have that question of how do I find these volunteers? I feel
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you go to who knows an EMT, who knows,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
the area,
Yeah, you know
occupational
those
therapist,
people,
that kind
yeah.
of thing. Yeah.
Whether it's your RCMP or your city police or
Hmm.
your doctors or nurses, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the
Thanks, Lisa.
football team to do the lifting.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, yeah, no, yeah.
All right, great. And Jamie, you had a question?
You guys actually just talked about it. I was going to ask about like the qualifications and trying to find volunteers who can lift athletes out of the water. So
Yeah, yeah.
just keep chatting. You'll answer all my questions.
Okay. Yeah, so it's good to go to some of those sports teams where, you know, we've got well-built athletes for and I have to say, I mean, I've lifted a lot of athletes out of the water and the sling is so helpful.
Yes.
I mean, you need it, but you'd be surprised at, and with the right technique. And we will, Triathlon Australia, I believe it was Triathlon Australia, did a great video on the swim exit volunteers. So we'll
Mhm.
share that with you as well once we're more into race prep season.
Yeah.
And we can put that on the same kind of a call as the para rules. And just so you know, like how those volunteers should be trained to safely and easily get the athlete out of the water. Yeah. And we'll send you, you know, photos of the slings and I'm not sure where the slings get sourced. Do you know, Lisa? That's one thing I don't know.
We do have some slings that we can ship if necessary.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah, I think Triathlon Canada has 10, and there's some out in Quebec as well. We could always see if we can borrow.
Yeah,
But yeah,
we have five. I know
get
we have
slings.
5 in Quebec, so they're just here. So I'm not sure where they got sourced from. Yeah. Question, Yvonne?
Yeah, we have a library password protected, and if you sent me all of that, I can create a space for paratriathlon in it. And
Okay,
say, and we have an
great.
officials area, so any kind of rule updates, we can load there. So if you send it to me, everyone has access to it on the web.
Okay, great. And Carly, you have a question?
Yeah, kind of a comment slash question. Just for anyone in the province, certainly like I don't mind helping a little bit too when it comes to specific courses, just because I have done a lot of the race courses, but then I also have some of the para triathlon background. So at least I've met you indirectly, and yeah, Anastasia, it's great to hear you talk, but I used to coach like way back, like 2010, for like our world, I guess we did camps leading up to Worlds. So I coached our national team at the camps, kind of like in Budapest, Beijing, and Auckland. And then the last year I had my daughter, and that was kind of like 4 kids later. But yeah, like locally, for those who don't know, I'm happy to have like an ear, and very similar to what's already been presented. Like that's how I would approach it too, is talking to individual athletes. Like there was a local athlete who tried to do some races, and it was it was just a matter of working individually with the courses. But yeah, anyway, I just wanted to say that, like for local things. And I think there is, like, I can suggest some resources to Yvonne from the coaching side. Like there's a lot of coach education materials from NCCP, right? So kind of life has come full circle, and now I teach an adapted physical activity course as a faculty member in kinesiology. So it's like my teaching area now. And my 4-year-old son has an intellectual and physical disability, so life has a way of bringing it all full circle. So anyway, happy. I've kind of tried to just sort of be involved as much as I've been able with the 4 kids, but locally definitely happy to, especially when it comes to like a race course, just be like, what do you think about this? And since I've done some of those hills, I could be like, yeah, that might be a little steep for this scenario.
Great.
Yeah, but yeah, and actually one of the pictures you used was, I had done some of our first like NCCP content for paratriathlon, and there was a picture of Grant Darby with his crutches, kind of the athletes waiting to start. Anyway, we used that one at the front of it, so I was like, oh, it looks good
cool.
to see all that. So thank you so much. Yeah, it's like full circle to hear it all again from the other side, but happy to get more involved as time allows me.
Yeah, awesome, Carly. Thank you so much. Does anybody else have any questions or comments at this time?
Yeah, hi,
Okay,
this
so,
is Vance.
oh yeah,
Oops, sorry. Can you
go
hear me?
ahead, Vance. Yes.
Oh, yeah. I've got kind of a question, and well, 2 questions really. First, most of our run on our race course is gravel, so I think that would pretty much rule out any para side, right?
It depends how hard packed it is, and what the surface is like, and so, and how wide it is. Not
Okay, well,
necessarily.
the width isn't an issue, but it's
Okay.
relatively loose-ish gravel, so I think that might be hard for the wheelchair. However, though, another thing I was thinking earlier on when I was looking at our course and how we'd work on it, on swim when there's sand, have you guys ever tried belting, like 3 foot, from mines and whatnot, when they discard their old belts, conveyor belts and whatnot, you can get it, they'll give it away for free. It's about 3 feet wide, super durable. Is that an option? Like just to lead up to the sand, up to the water, so you can get it away from the sand when they're coming out? Or is that
Most
just
definitely. Yeah.
pointless?
Yeah.
No, that sounds like a really good option. Yeah.
Yeah, we've even discussed with the race director in Kamloops. They had a dock situation, so we were looking into all sorts of like submergible docks and stuff. So I think, yeah, having that kind of I don't know, belt or traction onto the sand would be great. And I've seen it on some beaches around the world where they have that blue matting that goes out into on the sand, and it's actually, they can push their chair on that. So once they get to, so if you had their transition before that belt, and then they can get into their chair and get to transition, that's an option for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, great idea. Thank you. That's awesome. Any other questions or comments?
Well, I want to thank you, Anastasia and Lisa, and all of you for coming. And Carly, I think we'll have to chat about a adaptive clinic for coaches. But thank you so much. This was so informative. And I guess a question then is next steps for race directors. If you're interested, to let me know, and then I can set up with Anastasia the review of your event. And then we can also brainstorm any resources that we can look into to support it. But we're going to sort of lead this as a team and provide you with the support that you need to get this off the ground this year. So
Yeah, that sounds great.
Great. Well, listen, thank you both. We
Thank you
really
as
appreciate
well.
you coming.
And if I can just say one more thing, as I said, you know, having some para athletes at a race is, they takes maybe a little bit more organization, but often we think it's a lot more complicated than it is when we haven't done it before. So there's a lot of support here for you to take this on if you're interested, and it's really it's just some small considerations and tweaking of the venue, of the event, of the course. So you know, solutions based. We do what we can to find solutions, and don't feel like it's a like a really big, you know, mountain in front of you. Like it's a little bit more consideration and planning, but it's really doesn't take much more to be able to include these athletes at our events, if the course, you know, allows it, depending on the race course, of course. Yeah. So thank you all so much for being here and for your questions and participating, and for your great ideas as well. And I look forward to keeping the conversation going.
Hey,
Awesome.
good night.
Thank you.
Excellent. Good night. Thank you,
Thank
Good night,
guys.
you.
everyone. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.